Well, a very good morning to you. This is the new dawn here on K24 on this 10th day of December 2024. I do appreciate that you could, of course, make time to be with us here this particular morning on a day that the political intrigues here in the country continues to take center stage yet again after President William Ruto yesterday paid a courtesy call to former President Uhuru Kenyatta at his Ishaweri home in Getindi South, Kiambu County. The president and the former president, if you can remember, were at loggerheads ahead of the 2022 general elections, and in fact, former President Uhuru Kenyatta did support former Prime Minister Raila Odinga in his quest to succeed him, but they did not, or they were not successful in that particular bid after the then Deputy President and the current President William Samoei Ruto did, of course, outshine them in the elections. But this latest move throws a spanner into the works in terms of political realignments here in the country. President William Ruto meeting former President Uhuru Kenyatta comes just months after former President Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto rather, had some sort of a handshake agreement with former Prime Minister Raila Odinga following the anti-government demonstrations led by the youth across the country in June through to July. Well, then, the former Premier and the current President decided to work together with the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, of course, nominating a few of his trusted lieutenants, led by the likes of Ali Hassan Joho and Opiyo Ndai, into cabinet. In fact, ODM people do say ODM donated their experts to government. Experts who, as at now, have turned into mouthpieces of the Kenya Kwanza administration, defending President William Ruto at any given opportunity. Now, the question is, after the meeting yesterday at Ishaweri in Getindi South, are the allies of former President Uhuru Kenyatta likely to be considered in state appointments? Was that part of what was, talked upon or agreed upon during the meeting? Because remember, we still do have two vacant CS slots here in the country, and there was a looming, for a very long time they said there was a looming reshuffle within the principal secretaries, but that did not happen. Will this new meeting, of course, yet again revive those talks over reshuffle within the reshuffle of principal secretaries or not? And what does that particular meeting mean? Not just for the country, but for former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, current Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki, for the likes of Kalonzo Musyoka, ahead of the 2027 general elections, even as the reconstitution of the IEBC continues to take center stage, a conversation that the former president and the current president talked about, according to a press release from both their offices, that is State House and the office of the former President of the Republic of Kenya. This particular morning will be delving deep into that particular conversation and what that move by, of course, President William Ruto to pay a courtesy call to former President Uhuru Kenyatta means for the country and his Kenya Kwanza administration. Remember as well, this comes at a time when the president himself is facing a lot of, opposition from the vast Mount Kenya region following the ouster of former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua in October. And of course, many argue that this could also be a plot by the sitting head of state to try and bring back the Mount Kenya region to his fold. Will he be successful in that quest or not? We'll be looking at that later on in our conversation this particular morning. We'll be joined by lawyer Murara Omoke. We'll be joined by Dr. Mark Matuga, as well as Mr. Odoyo Owidi, to just dissect that particular conversation and give you a perspective and understand better what that particular meeting by the former and the current head of state means for you as a Kenyan. Remember, in the run-up to the general elections in 2022, President William Samoei Ruto did say it was an election of the hustlers against the dynasty, or the dynasties, if you'd call it that. Well, in the past 4 months, 5 months, the chief hustler himself has been forced to look for the dynasties. Some would say after being in some sort of under siege from the real hustlers. Will the new argument between the head of state, the former prime minister, and the former president bear any fruits for you, the Kenyan? And will it be of great help in trying to ensure that the economic situation in the country takes a turnaround for the better? That will be later on in the conversation. But at this particular moment in time, I just want us to look at what is making headlines in the news this particular morning. And just before we go into that, remember this is a show that you can watch live across our social media platforms at K24 TV. And this particular morning, I just want to get your feedback and your response and your views in regards to that particular meeting. Our question is, what do you make of that particular meeting between former President Uhuru Kenyatta and his successor, President William Samoei Ruto? To the bulletin now, and in an unprecedented move, President William Ruto yesterday paid a courtesy call to retired President Uhuru Kenyatta at his home in Ishaweri, Gatundu South, Kiambu County. In a statement sent to newsrooms by the office of the retired president, the visit is a normal and common practice for sitting and former presidents to engage on matters of national importance. The duo discussed issues including political animosity in the country, matters of taxation, and the raging debate on the reconstitution of the electoral body IEBC. As Timothy Simona reports, Ruto's visit and apparent reconciliation with his predecessor comes on the heels of a perceived strained relationship since 2018.
Thank you, my friend.
Monday, 9th December 2024, Ishaweri, Gatundu South in Kiambu County, President William Ruto paid a courtesy call to retired President and his predecessor Uhuru Kenyatta.
Thank you.
In a statement sent to newsrooms by the office of the retired president, the visit was described as normal and a common practice for sitting and former presidents to engage on matters of national importance.
Thank you.
The statement further says pertinent issues affecting the nation like taxation laws, political animosity, and subsequent harassment of government critics, and inclusivity, emphasizing the need to seek consensus on development issues and governance, were discussed.
Thank you.
Kenyatta and Ruto further deliberated on the need to expedite the reconstitution of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission IEBC to entrench democracy and a vibrant opposition. On his part, President Ruto agreed to engage all stakeholders in an effort to remove unnecessary tensions in the country and to propose a reconciliatory way forward. He further acknowledged Kenyatta for his statesmanship for overseeing a peaceful transfer of power in 2022, despite not supporting him. Ruto's visit came amid what many Kenyans perceived as a broken relationship between him and his former boss since the famous 2018 handshake. Ruto accused Uhuru for alienating him from government when he embraced Raila Odinga in 2018. Never mind, today, President Ruto has Raila in his government under the broad-based structure. Previously, the former president's office also accused the government for frustrating the operations of his office through budget cuts and delayed disbursements, and even targeting the former First family. But with Ruto's visit to Ishaweri and Kenyatta's acceptance to work and advise Ruto where necessary going forward, the once dynamic duo might have just reignited the old bromance.
Asante. Thank you for nyama. Karibu sana bwana.
Timothy Simwa, K24 TV.
Now, President William Ruto is the main impediment to the fight against corruption. His decisions and appointments have given a major sign that he is not interested in fighting corruption. This is according to the AfriCog report launched yesterday, where the UDA government was accused of having plundered millions of shillings in budgeted corruption. Martin Opio attended that event and files the following report.
Bringing the next speaker.
With the 9th of December being the World Anti-Corruption Day, AfriCog marked the day with a report that laid bare the corruption menace under President William Ruto in the last 2 years of his presidency.
William Samoei Ruto.
The report claims that corruption cases have been on the rise and Kenyans will continue to lose money as the government has shown no interest in the quest to weed out the corruption monster. As per AFRICOG, President Ruto has been the biggest impediment to the fight.
Many of those asked, the majority of those asked, gave the responsibility for that movement in the wrong direction to the president himself, which, as you know, the buck stops with him. So that's only to be expected. Yeah, so that's why we said we are moving in the wrong direction. Corruption is not reducing, it is increasing.
Gladwell Otieno, AFRICOG Executive Director, asserts that appointments done by President William Ruto in various sectors are clear indication of the declining zeal to fight corruption.
Impunity is increasing. We've seen people being, seen charges being dropped against people who were accused of some very serious crimes. Some of the people who were appointed into the cabinet were accused of serious crimes, not just, you know, civil infractions.
The Auditor General's reports show that 20% of government expenditure is actually being stolen.
Withdrawal of corruption cases targeting prominent individuals was also cited as disheartening to Kenyans at large, including how the judiciary handles the said cases.
There are not that many people who think that there is still a capacity to do anything about corruption in this country.
These are not just individual outbreaks of corruption scandals. This is a system which is entrenched and which works to reproduce corruption and impunity, and it will get worse if nothing happens to stop it.
Despite claims that government loses 2 billion shillings a day, the amount is said to be even higher as officials in government devise new ways of pilfering funds through budgeted corruptions.
Money is put into the budget for no other purpose than to be extracted for corrupt ends.
Whistleblowers appear to be persecuted. AFRICOG is also disturbed by how the government responded to the Gen Z uprising, demanding an end to corrupt dealings and good governance. Some were killed, arrested, abducted and tortured.
They tend to weaken those institutions which compete with them or which pose a threat to them. So we've seen, for example, the controller of budget, who's been quite outspoken, being threatened and sued, prosecuted. The president invited members of the opposition into his government, so there are ever more mouths to feed. No? You remember the phrase, it's our turn to eat.
EACC was not spared, with the organization lamenting the declining cases coming from the agency.
Reports to the EACC are declining year on year. We're now talking about only 5,000 complaints being made to them, when 5 years ago they used to receive 10,000 complaints a year. It tells you that people have lost faith in that institution.
The Adani contracts relating to JKIA and Ketraco, as well as the edible oil scandal, are said to be some of the biggest corrupt dealings under the Kenya Kwanza government. Martin Opio, K24 TV, Nairobi.
Now, as the world commemorated the International Anti-Corruption Day, the European Union ambassador to Kenya, Henriette Giger, said Kenya can be able to operate without over-reliance on borrowing if the government can step up its efforts in the fight against corruption. Her sentiments were echoed by British High Commissioner to Kenya, Neil Wigan, who noted that the UK government will aid in revealing those stashing proceeds of corruption abroad. It is during the commemoration of the International Anti-Corruption Day that the European Union ambassador to Kenya, Henriette Giger, was quick to note that Kenya could be in a position to freely operate without extensive borrowing from institutions like the IMF. If at all, the government can not only articulate its policies on fighting corruption, but enforce the same.
You don't need any IMF, you don't need any World Bank, you don't need any USAID, EU, etc. If you curb corruption, you have more than enough money to go around. That's the opportunity, the golden opportunity for Kenya. But it needs a very big shift. If you stole just 500 Kenyan shillings rather than stealing 1,000, we can cut theft by half. And drastically reduce our external borrowing.
Despite lauding the steps made by EACC in recovering proceeds of crime, Giga lamented over the now devolved corruption.
Money gets into counties, but the accountability mechanisms are not yet established. Otherwise, the only thing we do is decentralizing corruption. This is certainly not the idea. The idea of devolution was to bring services to every single Kenyan citizen.
On his part, British High Commissioner to Kenya, Neil Wigan, in a move that he said would help fight corruption, hinted at the UK government cracking the whip on those stashing proceeds of crime abroad, as well as those facilitating the same.
So we will be looking at those corrupt individuals who use institutions in the UK, who try to hide their money in the UK, to make sure that that cannot happen. And we will act against those individuals who we believe are facilitating corruption internationally. So please look out for what we will say later on today as proof of what I'm saying.
EACC Chairperson Bishop David Oginde, while narrating the challenges faced in the fight against corruption, called on Kenyans to properly vet leaders before electing them into office.
They are already trying to get me out. Parliament almost got me out just the other day. Thank God for the law that the Speaker upheld, and now I can still stand here as chair of EACC. Let us participate in the appointment and election of men and women of integrity. One of the biggest challenges we face as a nation is that when it comes to voting, we choose people according to what they have given us.
Corruption remains one of the greatest challenges of our time. Its tentacles reach into every aspect of our society, eroding trust in institutions, stifling economic progress, and denying ordinary citizens access to opportunities and services. The cost is particularly heavy for young people as corruption undermines education, employment prospects, and societal equity.
Now, youths are now the new hope in the fight against corruption in Kenya. They have been on the front line in advocating for good governance, as was seen during the anti-government demonstrations. The Association of Media Women in Kenya, through the coordinator of the USAWA program, Alona Sempele, says there is need to empower the youth with the skills to fight against poor leadership that has escalated corruption. Mumbi Ombugu with more.
Can we make the world a better place?
During a forum held in Nakuru to discuss and brainstorm on the ways to combat corruption, youths were thirsty for better governance. Brian Silways, a spoken word artist, says the youth will not relent in this fight. He says they will continue to fight through art until they are heard.
Unapata mwizi akiiba simu anapigwa na mob justice anakufa, but politician akiiba mabilioni ya pesa, there's nothing being done to that. So sometimes hati na wa morali.
Another artist, Samuel Njoroge alias Priest the Poet, who uses the character of a priest to advocate against violation of human rights, says young people have a great responsibility to instill good values in the society.
The uprisal of the Gen Zs during the protest has made the people to realize that we the Kenyans are also, we the youths are also politically conscious.
Through the USAWA program facilitated by Amwick, the youths were armed with skills and empowered to enable them carry out their roles as the new watchdogs of good leadership and upright vices within the society.
Youth must recognize that they have power to bring about change. Your voices matter. You can actually influence laws and policies. You broke down the finance bill for us to understand. Technical knowledge that people thought could not even be understood was broken down for the whole country by our youth. So you can help us understand our laws and our policies and our rights as citizens.
Wito wangu kwa vijana ni kwamba kwa muda mwingi sana tumesema kwamba sisi ni viongozi wa kesho. Lakini sasa kesho imefika na sisi ndio tuko. Kwa hivyo ni sisi yafaa tuungane, ni sisi yafaa tuje mbele, ni sisi yafaa tushikane mikono ili tuweze kuona ni vipi ambavyo tunaweza pambana na hili janga la ufisadi. Manake si watu wengine ambao wanatuangalia, si watu kutoka nje ambao watakuja tusaidia.
Religious leaders present said time has come for the clergy to come forth and speak in unison against corruption.
You are yet to see more because, as you can see, the church doesn't act just like the civil society. Something comes and it also erupts, because the bishops have to go first to the prayer, meditate, and also they get the right way through the Holy Spirit. So that's why we take our time in doing anything.
We need to say no to corruption in this country, because resources are allocated and we are not seeing the output of the resources that is being given to many institutions in the government. So it is to tell Kenyans, let us stand and fight this corruption in totality.
A recent research conducted by Transparency International indicates that Kenya is ranked 126 out of 180 countries in the corruption index.
Watu wako TikTok tap kwa sababu kwa tap hakuna maji na flow.
Mumbi Wambogo, K24 TV.
To matters politics now, the National Liberal Party has accused Kalonzo Musyoka of lying to the public and the church, saying the process of reconstituting IEBC is purely being delayed by the Wiper chief. According to NLP, all the nominees for the selection panel were vetted by a 5-member committee comprising of legal representatives of the clusters under the Political Parties Liaison Committee, as well as the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, who approved the election results.
Over the delayed reconstitution of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission rages on, Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka has called out National Liberal Party leader Augustus Charlo Muli, terming him as a government proxy being used to delay and frustrate the process. According to Kalonzo, Azimio followed the law which requires political parties with parliamentary representation to nominate a candidate for the selection panel, a prerequisite the National Liberal Party lacks.
Not allow himself to be used because he knows the party he represents does not have one member of parliament or indeed an MCA, maybe an MCA, because the law is very clear that it should be parties with the representation in parliament, taking into account as well gender. That matter was canvassed before the judge and a ruling issued.
Kalonzo further called out the Speaker of the National Assembly for dilly-dallying and allegedly working in cahoots with Muli to give room for the matter to be taken to the Court of Appeal, a move he says is the sole reason why the process has been halted to date.
Had 1 week since the matter was adjudicated upon by a judge, Azimio given 48 hours to give a name, which we did within that stipulated time. My brother, Speaker Wetangula, being the chair of Parliamentary Service Commission, should have acted with that 1 week. But gerrymandering, buying time so they can allow Muli to go to the Court of Appeal, which is what they did. That is the absolute truth.
On his part, however, the NLP leader has branded the Wiper leader a liar for trying to taint his name in bad faith.
Just a few hours ago, His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka claimed in public that I am a proxy of the government. I'm being used by the government. And I want to categorically say that this is a complete lie. I have been elected by 16 members in Azimio. 16 members out of 23 in Azimio. Where is the government's hand in all this?
To unlock the stalemate, Muli says he's ready to step down, but only for the right candidate, not one that is there to serve the interests of Kalonzo Musyoka.
Why doesn't he empower that democracy within Wiper? He is one who has stopped this process by wanting to install his own personal candidate for his own personal benefit. Where is democracy in that? Let us see why Wiper is so scared of my candidature, of me being in that selection panel. And if the people who elected me agree, I will step down and will choose somebody else that Kalonzo wants. But we are not going to allow individual interests to enter into the selection panel.
With both parties publicly expressing their willingness to have a dialogue, it now remains to see whether Kalonzo Musyoka's candidate, Koki Muli, who has stood her ground with part of Azimio maintaining Muli is the right candidate after meeting the requisite requirements, will be Azimio's nominee to the selection panel. Muli maintains that he was the duly elected nominee for the panel and that a faction of top Azimio leadership went ahead to bypass him for a more favorable candidate.
Of course, the blame game continues regarding the reconstitution of the IEBC, even as Kenyans continue to call for the urgent and immediate reconstitution of the electoral body, with only around 2.5 years before we go to the polls. On that note, we wrap up the news highlights this particular morning. We take a brief break. I'll be back in a moment with what is making headlines in the local dailies.